Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Skyland. Moondrop Skyland. It's a planar magnetic over-ear open-back headphone that many of us have been very excited about. And today I brought with me Caleb to also talk about it. So you're going to get 2 reviews for the price of 1. Imagine that. All right, so why has the Skyland been something that we've been looking forward to? Well, this is a driver that's very, very capable. So when we saw the Skyland come out, we saw its frequency response. There were reasons to be very excited. Moondrop's one of these companies that does put the frequency response on the box, and things looked very, very good. So now we have it in. We've put it through its paces, and we have opinions. So, Caleb, is there anything that sort of jumps out at you initially from the Skyland? Is there anything that you want to talk about right at the gate?
Build-wise, obviously, I think that's probably the most distinctive thing. The headband here is very unique, I guess. It has this sort of almost alien-like honeycomb-like design on it. But it is a very heavy headphone, and it is, definitely meant for larger heads. When I was trying it in Shenzhen for the first time when I was at SIAS, I literally had to physically carry, lift the headphones up on my head and use my hands to support the weight of it while I was giving a demo on it. So I don't know how you felt about it, but that was sort of like my first impressions of this headphone in general.
To me, the build and the design of it, the mechanical design and like how huge it is, that's kind of the downside. Not to say that this is poor build quality. I actually like the way that it feels, and I love the way that it looks. I think it looks awesome. And this suspension headband strap thing also feels great on the head. My problem with it is that it's just so huge, and I had the same problem with the previous designs. For me, it's reasonably comfortable because I have a very large head, but it's difficult to recommend this massive of a headphone, to the average person, because like even for you, Caleb, right? Like I imagine this is a very large fitting headphone, and isn't going to couple correctly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wearing the Moondrop Old Fashioned right now, and I can literally put this headphone on top of it. It's a good point there that you mentioned about the coupling, because this headphone, because how wide the headband is, you don't get a very strong clamp force on this, right? So for those who want, a headphone that really hugs your head, that's not going to happen here. Now, what I do find interesting though is that at first I thought I needed to somehow modify this to really get that tighter clamp force to really make the headband smaller. And some of you who have seen my shorts, I used a pair of chopsticks to try and make that happen. But that was kind of a joke. I took the chopsticks off and I was just using it normally, and I actually found it was okay. It did feel a little loose, and I had to hold my head still pretty straight, but I still felt that I could listen to it sort of no problem, right? It was actually ended up being okay for me. But if my head was any smaller, it would not work anymore.
This is sort of made worse by the move from some sort of metal headband that they had on the previous versions of this, like the Cosmo and the Para 2, to this carbon fiber material for the top headband piece. To me, this is very much a big head only headphone. And that's a shame. I really would strongly implore Moondrop to come up with a new top headband design or something that's going to be more accommodating of a wider range of heads, because this just ain't it. For the rest of the design, though, like I do love the way that the pads just sort of snap on and off, like with this magnetic piece. I think that's great. And the pads on this feel quite a bit better than the pads that were used on the Cosmo and the Para 2. Maybe the thinking here would be that because this is not as thin, it might couple better, but I feel that just isn't the case. Like for me, when I have it on my head, and I can literally shake this off my head very, very easily.
That's the same thing for me. If I lean my head like left or right a little bit too much, you can feel the weight of the drivers kind of dragging it down. And I think that's really the big thing with this headphone. I think I mentioned it somewhere in HeadFi that literally the rest of this headphone, except the cups, like could just be air, and it would still weigh like 95% of what it does. It's right in the cups, right? I think there are some mods where you can actually flip the headbands or like upside down, and it helps tighten things up. And I think shout out Superstar Review mentioned it to me. I haven't done it because I didn't want to break the only unit I had before making a video, but that's what I'm probably gonna do after. For the cables, really quickly, since we have them. What do you think of this flat copper cable here?
Not a fan. Don't like flat cables, man. Like, no.
Yeah. So I usually...
I'd say like for flat cable, it's okay, but I just don't like flat designs for cables.
Yeah. I'll echo that. I think as far as flat cables go, I think it's probably one of the best flat cables I've ever seen. I like the copper styling. I like how soft the sheeting material is. Flat cables still suck either way. So yeah, at least they give us 3.5 on each connector here. So, you can at least swap it out if you want to.
Let's get into sound quality. Let's talk about how this sounds, because there's some debate to be had here, I think. Yeah. How did you get on with it? Like, just subjectively.
Yeah, subjectively. I mean, I haven't seen the graph even from you, but from what Moondrop had on the box that I saw, it's near like pure DF HRTF, obviously, with some variation here and there, but you're going to be expecting something that's really forward and really bright. And that's what I had when I came into this headphone. That's what I thought it was going to be. And I was kind of excited about that, not because that it's going to be really forward and really bright, but because it'll give a perfect, platform to just dial it down a little bit of EQ, right? That's what I thought going in with this headphone. But what I found when I actually put this on my head and actually started listening to music with it is I didn't actually find that I minded how, forward or bright it was. I actually didn't find it overbearingly so. Of course, the first like 5-10 minutes, I definitely felt sort of the glare in the mid-range. Like it was definitely a bit too forward for me. But after some time that, my ears adjusted, it kind of went away. I'm sure, Andrew, you have pretty different ears from me. So I'm curious to know your take on this one.
I think the issue that I have with this is flat diffuse field just isn't going to work for a wide range of stuff. We talk a lot about diffuse field here on this channel and its value. And really what we're talking about is the sound field condition for headphones, not the idea of flat diffuse field being something that we'd expect people would like, because it's just too lean. It's too lean, it's too glary, and it's too shouty. It lacks low frequency body and weight. It lacks any sense of impact and any sense of, fullness to the sound. I don't like it. So I was doing my testing with this in the member streams that we do last week. Just for folks who watched that, this is actually a second unit. So I've had 2 units into test, and yes, the frequency response is the same. So when I was going through my various different test tracks for this, there were some that stood out and sounded incredible because they really benefited from a more sort of clarity focused presentation to do with the ear gain. So like the upper mids, lower treble, and then the rest of the treble presentation that it has. And I would characterize the sound here as being bright and lean, but not fatiguing above like 5 kilohertz, right? Not fatiguing for the rest of that treble above there, which is it's a rarity, right? For a lot of planars especially, like things do get rather intense and weird the further, like as they go up into the higher frequencies there. And that's not really the case with this one. It actually sounds a bit more on the smooth side and timbrally reasonable side. It's just too much in relation to the lower frequencies for me.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask if you dared say the word smooth with this headphone, but you said it. I was also on the fence, like, do I really say this is smooth? It's bright. Like, there's no question this is bright. But I think it's crisp. There's a little bit of sharpness, but it's still smooth in the sense that you don't get lots of peakiness. So it's like a different type of brightness, and that's why I really like the treble on this headphone specifically.
Actually, again, when I was going through my test tracks, the tracks that sounded the best were the jazz, acoustic, modern jazz, piano jazz, that kind of stuff. That sounded actually really, really good. There's a track by Ulf Wakenius called Suffering, which was incredible on this headphone. Then somebody suggested to me that I listen to an artist called Hatsune Miku or something like that.
Yeah.
Because this was meant to be a headphone for the weebs, and they're like, try this with weeb music. And that sounded horrible.
Okay.
So I don't understand maybe help me out here, because like I don't understand what it is that people like about that kind of music with this headphone.
So to be clear, I don't listen to that either. It's too much. I would not listen to that on this headphone either. I was actually going to echo what you said about how certain tracks sounded just like friggin' incredible, and somewhere I'm a little like, I gotta pull back a little, right? So a lot of my library is a lot of like rock, like alternative rock kind of thing. And for the most part, it's pretty good. But what I find myself trending towards when I listen to this headphone is I like to listen to ballads. Like songs are a little slower, a little softer, a little less heavy on the instrumentation. I find the mid-range on this to have like this absolute sense of clarity. Like the first time I heard Etymotic ER4, like that crazy, absolute like mid-range focus. That's kind of how I felt with this headphone. And you don't really get that with many other headphones, which is why I find it pretty interesting. And like I said, I'm drawn a little bit more to those kind of softer, sort of gentler tracks. And this headphone does those spectacularly.
Vocals, obviously, as well. Like vocals get brought forward like crazy. I was listening to James Blake's Retrograde, and it was just like, holy smokes, like in your face. But not like in a super fatiguing way, just like a lot more forward.
I did have a question for you on this one. How did you find the bass on this headphone?
So I find the bass pretty lean. I do get a little bit of that when there's an air gap. There's a little bit of that sort of low frequency boost that comes through, and in that sense, it's kind of okay that this does like this is not a tight fitting headphone. It's a very loose fitting headphone, and maybe that in situ gives you a little bit more low frequency energy. For folks who aren't familiar, headphones that are these large diaphragm undamped planars like these, they actually increase in bass when there's an air gap. So when there's the seal gets broken, and that definitely happens here. That's one of the cooler features about this driver. When there's an air gap, it boosts so low into the sub bass, like 20-30 hertz is where the boost is. You're getting a lot of moving surface area with this headphone, but I don't think that it's not wide enough of an elevation in the bass to make up for the leanness overall for the rest of the like the mid bass, the upper bass, and low mids, right? Like that's basically non-existent in relation to the enormous amounts of ear gain and upper mid-range and lower treble presentation that this has between, again, like 2 and 4 kilohertz.
What I did like about this one is that I did feel that, they talk about like linear bass extension kind of thing. This one to me really feels like that linear bass extension. Like there's no roll off, and like you talk about like that mass, the, how much air it moves. I do, even if it's not boomy or super bassy, at least I can appreciate that it's not having issues replicating a lot of the low end frequency notes that can sometimes get missed, right? So for me, I didn't do any pad swapping, but I'm interested to know how you felt with all the different pads that you had.
I do think that the other pad that I used for the Cosmo might work. Like I think those are the Yaxi Comfort pads. They might work on this one too. But it's not something where I'd be running immediately to swap the pads. Instead, this is maybe more of a candidate for EQ. And maybe we can talk about that next, right? Like for this one, like adding a substantial elevation, like even a wideband elevation in the bass might be all you need. I personally would need more than that. I would need to add a bass shelf or some sort of elevation into the bass, and maybe a reduction to, the primary ear gain band, like, somewhere around 3 kilohertz.
Yeah, one of the first things I did when I got this headphone after playing around with it was trying to EQ it a little bit. I really liked just like that sheer, like absolute clarity this headphone had. So I found that by tweaking the EQ a little bit, I kind of lost a little bit of that. So I didn't go too far down that road, but I can certainly see how someone, like I said, I think this is a fantastic EQ platform, and in my opinion, a little bit easier than the HE600 to EQ to preferences.
I would say that it's a good EQ candidate if the mechanical design were better.
Right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
From the sound quality perspective, yeah, I think it's a good EQ candidate. And this gets me back to like that question that I have, like, is there a reason for a flat diffuse field headphone to exist? And I do think that, it's not an unreasonable thing to try and create. It's just that I don't think we should expect it to be something that people are going to flock to, right?
I don't know if people are going to flock to it, but at least sort of the way I see it is that this headphone is not playing in the $200 space where everybody's looking for like the best, like bang for your buck kind of thing, and it's like their first headphone, right? Someone looking at this headphone will probably be looking at it as like maybe a second, third, maybe fourth headphone, right? And at that point, I feel like there's a lot of merit in this being a little bit different. In my opinion, it is a very good headphone. It's just a little bit special, right? I feel like for the quote-unquote old school audiophile hi-fi sort of crowd, I feel like this sort of that demographic it's catering towards.
But how do you feel this stacks up relative to the rest of the headphones in Moondrop's lineup, or the rest of the planars, I mean?
To be honest, I can't really comment on that because I think the only other Moondrop headphone I've heard is the Venus. What I can comment on it is versus the HE600. I think for most people, the HE600 is actually the better headphone overall. It's smaller, it fits my head better, it hugs my head better. It's a little bit warmer, the treble's less bright, the mid-range is less forward. The HE600 is a great headphone, but it's still like quote-unquote relatively normal-ish. Versus this one where it does something a bit unique with that, almost pure DF, HRTF type of sound. So if you want to upgrade and you don't want something that's like just the same but a little bit better, you should go with the Skyland. But if you want something that's, like I said, the same but a little bit better, then the HE600 sort of the play there.
For me, this one does, like, I do think this is timbrally better than the Para 2, like, let's say no pad swaps. But with the Para 2, I feel you're getting basically the same capabilities as this. And when you pad swap to something like the FT1 Pro pads or something like that, I think you can achieve similar kinds of timbral goodness without the shouty glariness going on, right? So it's like out of the box, yeah, I do think this is better than the Para 2, but definitely not. It's definitely not as good as the Cosmo, because what the Cosmo did well was it had that leaner bass response, but then it also wasn't nearly as bright in the treble. So it was also mid-range focused, just not as punishingly so. And so for me, if I'm looking for that more specialist kind of sound signature, I still probably go Cosmo over this one. But as you say, if you have a massive head and if you're somebody who EQs, like I'm twisting myself into knots here, but like if you're willing to give it a bass shelf, like yeah, like there are things about this headphone that like they did do well. It's just I'm disappointed in it because I wish that the things that are deal breakers for me were also competently achieved, and they were not.
You and I think, sort of agree on the sound aspect of it, but our perspective of where that leads to is like completely different, right? For anybody watching reviewers out there and it's like, why is this reviewer so different from this guy? And like, we could be hearing the same thing. A lot of our ears are similar. It's just the perspective is a little bit different, right? Before we move on, I did want to ask, how did you find the staging experience? I know soundstage is a bit of kind of this topic, but what did you think of that on these headphones?
Not particularly. Like it didn't do the spaciousness effect in any meaningful way for me. Like I thought it was like I wasn't like bothered by it, but like I didn't find it to be like super wide, laterally well defined kind of stuff that you get from some of the hi-fi man, colorations that you get, like the arias and stuff like that. No, this was a much more normal presentation overall, and I kind of appreciate that about it.
Yeah, I'd agree, and that's why I wanted to ask. So I didn't find this like super big or spacious. I did feel you kind of got that sort of like nice diffused out like staging and imaging experience, right? But not super big, but not intimate either. I felt it was a good stage experience. Despite how intense the mid-range is, it didn't sound like super compressed in my head either, which, like I said, I appreciate that. The last thing I touch on, for the technicalities crowd, perceived technicalities, is the resolution, I guess. I thought this was a pretty well-resolving headphone. I thought it's not all in the treble, in my opinion. Like, it doesn't depend on, like, that fake elevated treble, in my opinion, to really, like, drive home the, that sense of detail and resolution. I thought it just was well-nuanced, well-textured overall, but not too in your face, once again, despite how strong that ear gain region was.
Yeah, this is not going to be, detail as a function of crazy wild colorations. This is going to be detail as a function of, unmasking, which is good. It's just that, the tilt is wrong. The tilt is not where it needs to be. I know I'm saying this over and over again, but it's like that's why it's kind of a frustration for me, because it's like it could have been great. It's not.
So last question, if we really want to put our money where our mouth is, what would you give this from a pure sound rating out of 10, and then from a pure like overall headphone rating out of 10?
So just sound quality, no EQ whatsoever, like not able to do anything. This gets a 4 out of 10. It gets probably a 4 overall for sound quality just because the tilt is wrong. But if the tilt were slightly more, like if it were warmer or had more bass to it, then this would be as high as like a 6, maybe even a 7 if that ear gain was less of a problem. From an overall score perspective, like for the headphone, this gets like a 3 or a 4 because the ergonomics just don't work.
And just for everybody who's watching, a little context is Resolve and listener and Cameron did do like a headphone ranking kind of list, and you can see that over at the Headphone Show or on the headphones.com, and they have specific rubrics for that. Complete vibes based for me. Sound wise, you gave it like a 3 or 4. I would actually give it like 7 or 8 personally.
Wow.
Yeah, and once again, this is not using your rubric, right? This is like using complete like vibes based, kind of like almost like that Amazon store, kind of like 4 out of 5, 7 out of 10 kind of thing. I would go as high as 7 or 8 on this just for pure sound. I really appreciate the fact that this is a very unique sounding headphone. Like I can't think of another headphone that sounds like this on the market. So I would go like 7 or 8 for just pure sound, but definitely when it comes to overall product, I would drop it to a 5 or 6 maybe, just because of the unwieldiness of it. Like when you hold it in your hand, it feels like it's really floppy, right? And there is stiff competition with the HE600. I think that's the other thing to keep in mind. But sound-wise, I'll definitely pull it out every now and then just for I want to hear something with absolute like focus.
So obviously, we've had very different opinions on this headphone, and one of the reasons why that's possible for us to do in these videos is because of headphones.com's support. They obviously just make everything that we do here on this channel possible. And also importantly, the fact that you can't always know that what you're going to get is going to work perfectly for you. Maybe something that you get ends up being a 4 out of 10, where the information that you got it from was saying it was a 10 out of 10. And headphones.com has a crazy return policy that allows you to do that without needing to worry about it. So check out headphones.com. They're a great place to learn about and buy headphones. So that's going to do it for our thoughts on the Moondrop Skyland. Let us know if you guys have heard this headphone, what you guys think, and if you guys enjoyed this format. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Do all of those things, and you can chat with us in our forum or our Discord, also linked below. And until next time, we'll see you guys later. Bye for now.
Bye.